So I'm lying on a hospital bed, and I am pitched at an 80-degree angle with my head pointing down to the floor and my big, fat, swollen feet sticking straight up in the air. I don't want to be in this hospital room, but I am about to have twins, 2 babies that are not due for 10 more weeks. I am in a pickle, and I do not want to be here. My feet, well, they look like swollen, uncooked croissants or Cinnabons, and the rest of my body is just as bloated. And there are doctors and nurses. They're just like running around the room with all these machines beeping. And my poor husband, Brendan, he's sitting right next to me with this cup of ice chips that I want to just swat right out of his hand because I don't want any of these people in this hospital room. The only person I really want there is my sister Rhonda, but she's not around because she's been gone for, 12 years now. Unfortunately, she died when she was only 21 years old, leaving me behind to have to raise myself. And I am not equipped to have these babies. Ugh. I mean, I don't understand how I got here. Now, I did love being pregnant. It was probably one of my most exciting experiences, and I showed it off the same way Demi Moore did on the cover of that Vanity Fair. I used to walk around strutting in these onesies, this black unitard with my huge belly sticking out, and I would get catcalled by every hot dog vendor who wanted to know if I wanted some free street meats. They were all my friends. And when I'd get on the subway, if I saw guys spreading out their man legs, I would just say, "Stick them together, boys. I need a seat." And I was like the Madonna. I always got a seat. And the best part of all was going to work because I was the boss. So when I would show up at my office, if I needed something done, I would just stick my huge belly on I would teabag a desk, basically. I would stick it right on the desk, and my belly button would be like winking at my assistant, and I would just like yell some order. Always everything got done. So it was like being the queen bee. It was the most exciting experience. And I really did love the idea of having a baby because I knew it would make my parents so happy. Finally, something good was going to happen in our family. So anyway, it's a week before Christmas, and I'm big as a house. I have gained 50 pounds. Now, here's the thing. I weighed 100 before I was pregnant. So I gained half of my body weight in like sabrettes and gabilica niches and all of those fantastic raised papaya juices. I was like a big pig. And we are at Uncle Dick's Christmas party on the Upper East Side, and I am double fisting pigs in a blanket, and I notice across the room melons wrapped in prosciutto, and I'm noticing also at the same time moisture in my underpants, which I think could be the prosciutto, but I know at that moment that my water has broken. Holy shit, I'm going to have the babies. So I whisper in Brendan's ear, "It's time for the hospital." And Brendan just looks at me like a deer in the headlights, and the two of us run out of that party, get into a cab, and go from the east side to the west side because I need to get to the St. Luke's Women's Hospital on Amsterdam and 114th Street. We get there, and right away, my doctor, modern woman, decides the best way to stop this birth happening is gravity. I am so glad that all the machinery and science has been created for her to go back to sticking me upside down, which she does. And this is how I stay for hour after hour, just hoping and praying the labor stops. But it doesn't. It just keeps getting worse. Now, okay, we've all heard stories about what it's like to have a baby, so I don't have to go into great detail. But let me just remind you that it's like taking a cheese grater on your uterus and just rubbing it back and forth like every 4 or 5 minutes. It's not pleasant, but what they don't tell you about having a baby is that while you're lying there in some schmutzy hospital gown that's covered in your sweat and those ice chips, is that some strange, usually a man, pops his head into the room, puts on one rubber glove, and then goes up your hooch like he's looking for car keys that maybe he left in a couch. No hello, no drinks, no fine howdy-do. He's in, he's out, doesn't even make eye contact. And this goes on hour after hour after hour. There is no dignity in having babies. Finally, we get to the 36th hour. I'm still on my head when finally all the bells and whistles start ringing. You would have thought that I had just stolen a sweater at the Gap, because at this point, it is just like, it's criminal. So what happens is the doctor realizes that one of the babies has a distressed heartbeat, and they've got to get these twins out fast. So they shoo everybody out of the room. They've got the stencil paper and what seems to be some sort of magic marker, making a line on my huge distended belly before I'm even put out to rush me into an emergency cesarean section. Everyone's out of the room. And the next thing I know is I am in recovery, and there are two teeny tiny babies that look like, I don't know, hamsters, I would say, bald, wet hamsters, and they're in one of those hydroponic pot growing machines, which are really the incubators, and they're in there, and the doctor says they're going to make it. They're just preemies. They're very small, but they're going to make it. Now, I want to add at this point that the two babies' combined weight was 5 pounds. Let me remind you, I gained 50 pounds in this pregnancy, and I could like to say I had big bones, but I didn't. It was like all water weight, but it was all Gray's papaya. Okay, that's what it was. So at this point, we are just so relieved I had these babies, and Brendan is able to call my mother and say it's okay, the babies are going to survive. And I'm thinking my sister had to have had a hand in this, because this was a miracle that they're going to be fine. This girl definitely earned her wings. So finally, time has passed, and they really do grow far enough that they can leave the hospital 7 weeks later. And they're still, each of them, under 4 pounds. But we do the best we can, which it's not easy, because I don't know anything about birth and babies, and I certainly don't know anything about very high-strung, little tiny preemies, but I do the best I can. Time passes. I finally get back to work. I am like the walking dead. I am a zombie. I am so exhausted, working full-time and also trying to raise these kids, not knowing what the hell I'm doing. And at some point, Brendan says, my husband, he says, you know what? We need to go to California to visit my sister Audrey and her husband Joe and their kids. They need to meet our family. And I agree, but I say we have to wait till they're older. And he says, I get it, but you know what? We can manage. So we wait until they're old enough. We decide, out of arrogance and stupidity, that we're going to get on a plane from New York to San Francisco when they are 8 months old. And I don't know what I was thinking, what baby book I thought I had read, that I had this handled, but I was a fool. Okay, so we get on that plane to go to California, and I was also under this misguided impression that flight attendants have an interest in other people's babies. Okay, now they might, but they had no interest in mine. It could be because Kira had a snot bubble, one of those big clear bubbles that was kind of waddling on its own. And Lindsay, well, she kind of just smelled like colic and hatred. So we were completely ignored for the entire flight. And I forgot that they might need a diaper change. Now, if you've ever tried to change a baby's diaper in that steel tin bathroom, it's like you think you're in Cirque du Soleil and you're trying to do some sort of, I don't know what movement, but it's almost impossible. It's like a whole new meaning to joining the 5 Mile High Club, a club you don't want to belong to. Okay, finally, we land. We are so exhausted. We are delirious. We limp off the plane with all of our goods and chattel and our car seats and the boosters and the strollers and these crying wet babies in their diapers. And we limp to the curbside where we see Audrey and Joe and their little boys with their clean hair and their strong calf muscles and their nice little Lacoste t-shirts all pressed, matching with their minivan door open. And I look, well, let's put it this way. I look like I arrived at Ellis Island for a lice check, and they were going to send me back to Anatevka. That's what I look like. But we limped, all of us, into the back of the minivan. I was just so happy to be stationary, thinking we're going to spend 7 days completely relaxing in Palo Alto in their lovely little home. We're just going to play with everybody's babies. Their kids were about the same age as ours. This was going to be perfect. As soon as we get in the van, I'm thinking, oh boy, this is going to be a problem, because I forgot that Audrey's just a little on the bossy side and she had big plans. And my suspicions were correct, because as soon as we got to her house, she handed out 3 pages of our itinerary, and there were flowcharts, and I swear to God there was a bulletin board like Carrie had in Homeland with strings and push pins telling us exactly what we were going to be doing. There was Santa Cruz. There was the Rodin exhibit at Stanford. We were going to downtown San Francisco. Plans, lots of plans. And I'm just thinking, I just want to suck my thumb on the couch with these kids. And I also detected, as soon as I walked into her house, the smell of fresh bran muffins being baked. Now, if gluten were a thing back then, I know those muffins would not have any gluten. And I'm busy trying to hide the Pepperidge Farm goldfish that are still like sitting flaked in my daughter's hair, because that's how I roll. But I'm just going to try to be a good sport and keep up with Audrey and Joe. So I was a good sport. And for the first 3 days, even though the kids slept about 20 minutes combined in these ridiculous playpens in the middle of their living room, we just did what we could to be good relatives. That's how I was seeing it. I'm going to be a good relative. And then something magical happened on the 5th day. Kira and Lindsay both got terrible ear infections, and they were running a fever. Okay, now this is a horrible thing for any mother to admit, but I was relieved that they were sick, because I finally had a legitimate excuse not to go to Santa Cruz on trip number 6. And when I told her that we needed to just find a pediatrician and get these kids dosed up with antibiotics, she immediately went into action, because Audrey is a can-do gal. And after we went to the doctor and the girls felt better, we were able to calm down and just hang out and do nothing in their lovely home. And by the end of that afternoon, I started feeling a little confident. So I suggested we go to the local playground. And Audrey said, sure. Meanwhile, it was the first day of the World Series, and both of our husbands were excited, because this was an opportunity for them to do a little pre-gaming without the women around and get the party set up for themselves with their cheese doodles and Fritos or whatever Audrey probably didn't want us to be eating. So we went to the local playground, and it was actually really fun. It was lovely. And while the girls are swinging and the boys are in the other swings and everything's fine, all of a sudden I hear what seems to be the L train running under our feet. It is loud, and when I look down, the earth is literally moving like Carole King would sing. The earth was moving under our feet. And Audrey, the always calm, collected, controlled, screamed, "Earthquake! It's an earthquake!" We grabbed the kids out of the swings. We tossed them into the sandbox. We jumped on top of them to shield them while the stroller started flying down, probably to Los Angeles at this point. And we just laid there. Now, I picked up my head and I saw cars literally rocking off their axles. That's how bad this was. And the sidewalk was rippling up, just like in a cartoon. This was serious shit going down. So we just stayed there for probably a minute or two, but it felt like an hour. The kids, to them, this was just another ride, like a swing. We then decided we got to get home before the aftershocks start. So we look around. We can't find the strollers. So we're running in every direction till finally we retrieve them. We strap those 4 kids in and we start running back to the house, dodging branches and brambles and God knows what detritus was on the sidewalk. We get back to the house, and surprisingly, it was in really good shape. There didn't seem to be any structural damage. Now, I will say, there was this mound of bric-a-brac on the living room floor filled with picture frames and those flow charts for our week's activities, and probably a couple of pie tins for her gluten-free food crap, whatever. And I'm thinking we really dodged a bullet here. And they even had electricity, so we turned on the news. Which was nonstop, because this apparently was a big deal, this earthquake. And we started seeing footage of bridges collapsed and roads completely screwed up. We were supposed to be in Santa Cruz that day. Our kids' ear infections and fevers saved us. We could have actually been really deeply injured. Now, at this point, I am apoplectic. So I just grab my babies and I just start crying. I'm bawling like a child. They still don't know what's going on, but I am so relieved and grateful to be alive. And the next thought I have is, get me the hell out of California. So we get on the first flight out, which isn't for 2 more days. And believe me, I wanted to kiss the tarmac when we landed. Now, the press was there in full court because we were the first flight out on American Airlines. But my kids were still sick, and they hadn't been back to the 5 Mile High Club because I was too exhausted to change their diapers. So by the time we landed at Kennedy Airport, they had poop like up to their chins. Their diapers were so wet. They weighed like 40 pounds each. And we were so toxic and noxious that nobody came near us to interview us, which was just fine. We just wanted to get the hell out of there. Okay, it took me like a year to recover from this experience. I was beside myself. And at this point, another year passes, and somehow, I don't know how, I had another child. I didn't plan it, it just happened. And now I am a shitty mother with 3 kids under the age of 6 years old. I am a hot mess. Now, I am not exaggerating when I say I'm not a good mother. I can admit that I left my son at 9 months old in his booster seat on a picnic table in a public park by accident. I loaded up the girls, I put them in their seats, I drove off, and I got all the way back to my house before I realized that I did not count out my staff in the back, my 3 children. My daughter had to say when we got home, "Where is Ryan?" I had to drive back to that playground where he was sound asleep with a sunburn on his forehead from the way I had positioned him facing the sun. And I am so damn lucky that there was not some sort of police car patrolling the area, or I probably would have had my shoelaces and belt removed and I'd never see him again. Okay, so I knew that day I was in trouble and I had to do something. And I remembered that when I was on that flight, the attendant, when they start you revving up on that runway, they tell you, fasten your seatbelts, and in the case of an emergency, you put the oxygen on your face first and then on your child, which seems sort of foreign to me, but now I realized it. I needed to breathe because I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. So I made a snap decision, and I told my husband, I'm leaving town. You're taking care of these children. I have to run away from home for 2 to 3 days. I will be back, but I need to breathe. And he agreed, thinking the kids are better off without you. Maybe you should go. So I made this choice to visit one of my best friends, Leslie, who happens to live in Los Angeles. Okay, so I decide to go to Los Angeles to visit Leslie, and we have the best girls' weekend you can imagine. Drinking, going to parties, pajamas, and just doing each other's nails. We're acting like we're back in high school. And then the last night when I start to ache for those children, I am so ready to go home. I got just what I needed out of this experience. I fall asleep in her guest bedroom. And at about 3:45 in the morning, all of a sudden, I hear the goddamn L train. And I hold onto those fitted sheets while I'm watching her ceiling fan whirling towards me. I'm thinking, this New York girl goes back to California to be decapitated by a ceiling fan because I am now in the Northridge earthquake. I live in New York. I have been to L.A., and any part of California less than 1 hand's worth of time, and I am in 2 major earthquakes. So Leslie and I were so freaked out when the tremor stopped in her apartment in Los Angeles that was totally demolished that we decided that we were going to have to leave there as fast as we could. But before we did, in the dark, we went rummaging through her medicine cabinet because we thought if we're going to be wandering the streets of West Hollywood, we need a Valium. So Leslie found a small prescription bottle and we each took one. Then we went in our pajamas and our flip-flops with nothing else, wandering the streets, looking for coffee or any kind of hot beverage, as if anybody was going to be open at 4 o'clock in the morning. We were obviously in shock, but we were also kind of confused and dazed and kind of screwed up. We were stoned, basically. Okay, so when we got back, finally the morning light shows up, and we go back into the medicine cabinet, hoping that we could maybe take more Valium because we don't know how we're going to handle the situation. And that's when we realized that we did not take Valium. We took Zithromax. We took antibiotics to calm down our nerves, and we were so freaked out that it actually had worked the night before. It was a mess. Okay, so I again get on the first American Airlines flight out the hell of California, and I'm thinking, this is a message. You are not supposed to be there. And I get back home, and I have never been so grateful to be in New York. So, folks, this is the lesson I've learned. You can lean in, you can lean out, you can do whatever you want. We have no control of our destiny. You got to just hold on to the handrail, enjoy yourself, and go for the ride.
That was Birthquake from Sandi Marx. Sandi is a retired talent agent, and anyone who is a regular attendee of the Moth Story Slams will know Sandi well, because she's won 7 of them. She's been in everything, basically. I can't enumerate all the shows she's been in, but I performed with her a while ago in the Risk live show, and she's been in the soundtrack series and Out by 10 and all kinds of other shows. And Sandi also has joined the ranks of those of us who hate ourselves and love ourselves enough to do a solo show. She just did her first solo show as part of the Dead Parents Club Festival presented by the Tank, called You'll Be Sorry. And I believe it's up on YouTube, so look for that. Or maybe not, because you'll be sorry. I feel like I feel this temptation to go into sort of like a Mark Maron-esque intro, because it's kind of been a sucky time lately. I've been struggling with what I found out was a herniated disc in my back, although I don't know where else it would be. It's in my back. It's been affecting my left side since it's been going on in a mild way for years, but it's become kind of debilitating since Christmas, and it's become incapacitating for the last month or so. And I finally got some treatment this past week, which I'm cautiously optimistic will help me. But it's just been life-dominating, and over the past few months, I've ended up having to cancel a lot of things. So I've had people scheduled to record, and I've just had sort of like, it's been a bad day or a bad week, and so I've had to cancel. And I felt really bad about that, and there have been a lot of shows I wanted to get to that I haven't been able to go to because of this. So anyway, so I hope things will get better. Having said that, this has been Modern Stories Mix, episode 18. I'm your host, your complaining host, Julie Threlkeld. I would like to thank, we had one funder, my friend Gail Thomas, who you will remember from episode 4 of this podcast, one of the most sonically rich episodes in this series, Patient number 13. I highly recommend it. I would like to let you know about a couple of festivals that are coming up this month. It is now July. First of all, Proud AF, which I think probably means proud as fuck. And we can say that on this podcast. We can say fuck because pretty much everything is rated explicit when it needs to be, which is most of the time. Proud as fuck is presented by the Tank. It will be at Standard Toycraft, running from July 7th through 9th, and then again it picks up July 14th through 16th, produced by Susan Kent. And that same second, half of the month, I'm very focused on July 14th because that's when the Ghostbusters reboot with the all-female cast opens. So I'm sort of living for July 14th. Anyway, the day after that, July 15th and July 16th, will feature another festival, Storyfest, at the Pit Loft, People's Improv Theater, for those of you who do not know what Pit means. Pit Loft is, I don't remember where it is, you'll have to look it up, but I think it's somewhere in Chelsea. And soon after that, just 2 weeks, I will be on the Sharon Spell Show podcast. I'll be talking about my leg and back problems and my cane, which ended up being a very amusing exchange between Sharon and I. I will also be having Sharon up to record a story, as well as many other people, unless things go south again. I am booked for a couple of shows in September and October, but that seems so long a ways off that I'm not even going to give you details because you'll have forgotten by then. I have made improvements to the Modern Stories studio. I have I'm using a Stedman, I think it's called a super clip or something. It's something that allows you to clip paper hanging off your mic stand so you don't have to hold it and rustle papers. And that's for me. And for my storytellers, I have a very nice, I've actually been trying to figure out how to get one of these, and I finally found one. I have this lovely little wall-mounted music stand. It's right at eye level. And this will, I've had some storytellers who have had to crane their necks to read their notes, and I've had to tell them to stop rustling their papers, and it's just, it's made everyone uncomfortable. And so I have this nice sort of miniature music stand, and it's made in Germany, so it's high quality. So my next batch of storytellers will be enjoying that. That's about all I can think of. Invite me on your show or your podcast. I'm fun. And if you like this podcast, subscribe on iTunes, and even better, leave a review on iTunes, because that way people can find me. And it makes me feel that doing this is worthwhile when I know there are people listening. It's Independence Day weekend, so I'm going to go have a beer and watch some television and celebrate my independence. As always, thank you for listening, and I will be back in August.